The courthouse doors slammed behind Elena Martinez with a metallic thud that echoed through the marble halls. Her discount store dress clung to her frame as she clutched a weathered folder to her chest, her knuckles white against the manila paper. Three men in $1,000 suits turned to stare, their expressions shifting from annoyance to contempt as they took in her appearance. The lead attorney, Harrison Blackwell, let out a low chuckle. "Is this some kind of joke?" he muttered, loud enough for everyone in the hallway to hear. "The cleaning lady thinks she can challenge Titan Industries?" Elena's jaw tightened, but she kept walking. What they didn't know, what none of them could possibly imagine, was that inside her folder lay documents that would bring their empire crashing down, and by the time this day ended, these arrogant billionaires would be on their knees, begging for the mercy they'd never shown to people like her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning had started like any other in the cramped apartment Elena shared with her teenage daughter, Sofia. The radiator clanked and sputtered as she prepared breakfast, stretching their meager groceries to make something that resembled a proper meal. Her reflection in the toaster showed tired eyes and graying hair pulled back in a simple bun. At 42, she looked older than her years, worn down by double shifts at the diner and night classes at the community college. "Mom, you sure about this?" Sofia asked, watching her mother straighten her only court-appropriate dress. "These people, they're not like us. They have armies of lawyers." Elena paused, her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Sometimes the truth doesn't care about how many lawyers you have, mija. The truth." It had taken her 3 years to piece it together, 3 years of painstaking research after her husband Carlos died in what Titan Industries called an unfortunate accident. The chemical plant explosion had claimed 12 lives that night, all of them maintenance workers like Carlos, all of them immigrants who'd been promised safety training that never came. The wrongful death settlement had been insulting, barely enough to cover funeral costs. When Elena questioned it, Titan's lawyers had laughed in her face. "Your husband signed a waiver," they'd said. "Besides, do you really think someone like you can take on someone like us?" Someone like her, a waitress with a GED, a woman who still struggled with English when she was nervous, a nobody. But Elena had something they hadn't counted on: time, determination, and a gift for seeing patterns others missed. While serving coffee and pancakes, she'd listened to conversations, collected discarded newspapers, spent her breaks at the library computer. Slowly, methodically, she'd built her case. The federal courthouse loomed before her now, all gleaming. Glass and limestone, a monument to power and justice. Though Elena had learned those two things rarely went hand in hand. She passed through security, her folder scrutinized by guards who seemed puzzled by her presence. "Courtroom 4B, one of them said, pointing down a corridor that seemed to stretch forever. The click of her worn heels echoed as she walked, passing, lawyers in Italian leather shoes and clients dripping with jewelry. A few whispered as she passed, and Elena caught fragments. Pro se litigant. Waste of time. Doesn't she know who she's up against? She knew exactly who she was up against. Titan Industries, a chemical manufacturing giant with operations in 14 countries, annual revenues exceeding 30 billion, and a legal team that had never lost a major case. At the helm sat 3 billionaire brothers, Richard, Thomas, and Gregory Blackstone, men who collected companies like others collected stamps. Courtroom 4B was already packed when Elena entered. The gallery buzzed with reporters, industry observers, and curious onlookers who'd heard about the David versus Goliath case. The Blackstone brothers sat at the defendant's table, looking bored and slightly amused. Their legal team filled 2 entire rows, a deliberate show of force. Elena's table, by contrast, was empty save for a single glass of water and a yellow legal pad. She set down her folder and tried to ignore the snickers from the defense team. "All rise," the bailiff's voice cut through the murmurs. The Honorable Judge Margaret Chen presiding. Judge Chen, a stern woman in her 60s, took her seat and surveyed the courtroom with sharp eyes. She'd built a reputation for fairness, though Elena knew that fairness often bent under the weight of money and influence. Case number 2024, CV 3891, Martinez versus Titan Industries, the clerk announced. Plaintiff alleges wrongful death, negligence, and corporate malfeasance in the matter of the Riverside chemical plant explosion. Harrison Blackwell rose smoothly, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. "Your Honor, if I may address a preliminary matter. Ms. Martinez has chosen to represent herself in this case, which is certainly her right. However, given the complex nature of corporate law and the technical aspects of chemical manufacturing, we respectfully suggest that the court appoint counsel to ensure—" "I don't need help understanding how my husband died," Elena interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. A ripple of surprise moved through the courtroom. Blackwell's eyebrows rose slightly. Judge Chen leaned forward. "Ms. Martinez, while I appreciate your position, Mr. Blackwell raises a valid point. This case involves intricate legal and technical matters. Are you certain you wish to proceed without representation?" Elena stood, her folder still unopened. "Your Honor, I've spent 3 years learning everything there is to know about this case. I've read every safety report, every inspection record, every internal memo I could get my hands on. With respect, no lawyer knows this case better than I do." Richard Blackstone, the eldest brother, leaned over to whisper something to Blackwell, who nodded and smiled, the kind of smile a cat gives a mouse. "Very well," Judge Chen said. "Mr. Blackwell, your opening statement." Blackwell's opening was a masterpiece of legal theater. He painted Titan Industries as a responsible corporate citizen, a job creator, a company that had revolutionized chemical manufacturing with cutting-edge safety protocols. The Riverside plant explosion, he argued, was a tragic accident, unforeseeable and unpreventable despite the company's best efforts. The plaintiff, he said, gesturing toward Elena with barely concealed disdain, seeks to turn her personal tragedy into a financial windfall. While we sympathize with her loss, grief cannot override facts. Mr. Martinez and his colleagues were experienced workers who understood the risks. They signed comprehensive waivers. They received industry-standard training. To suggest otherwise is not only false but insulting to their memory. He returned to his seat amid approving nods from the defense team. The Blackstone brothers looked satisfied, already mentally calculating how quickly they could wrap this up and return to their golf games and board meetings. Elena rose slowly. She picked up her folder but didn't open it yet. Instead, she walked to the center of the courtroom, letting the silence build. "My husband, Carlos, worked at the Riverside plant for 8 years, she began, her accent more pronounced now, but her words clear. Every morning, he'd kiss me goodbye and say, 'Don't worry, mi amor, they keep us safe.' He believed that. We all did." She paused, looking directly at the Blackstone brothers. "Industry standard training," Mr. Blackwell said. "Comprehensive waivers. These sound impressive. But what do they mean when the training consists of a 15-minute video in English for workers who barely speak the language? What do waivers matter when they're shoved in front of exhausted men at the end of 16-hour shifts, men who sign because they need the job to feed their families?" Blackwell started to object, but Judge Chen waved him down. "Continue, Ms. Martinez. The defense wants you to believe this was an accident, unforeseeable, unpreventable." Elena's voice grew stronger. "But accidents don't happen when safety inspectors are bribed to look the other way." Accidents don't happen when broken equipment is painted over instead of replaced. Accidents don't happen when workers' complaints are systematically ignored for years. The courtroom had gone completely silent. Even the court reporter seemed to lean forward, captivated. "Objection!" Blackwell shot to his feet. "These are wild accusations without a shred of evidence." "Oh, I have evidence," Elena said quietly, finally opening her folder. The next hour was a methodical dismantling of Titan Industries' carefully constructed facade. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Elena produced document after document, some obtained through Freedom of Information requests, others provided by anonymous sources within the company. She had internal emails discussing budget cuts to safety equipment, memos about covering up failed inspections, even security footage showing managers removing warning signs before visits from regulatory agencies. "This email," she said, holding up a printout, "is from Thomas Blackstone to the plant manager, dated 6 months before the explosion. It reads, 'The cost of replacing the containment system exceeds our quarterly profit targets. Find a workaround. Nobody needs to know.'" Thomas Blackstone shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "This memo," Elena continued, "instructs supervisors to conduct safety meetings in English only, despite knowing that 70% of the workforce primarily spoke Spanish. When workers couldn't understand the procedures, they were marked as trained anyway." Harrison Blackwell objected repeatedly, but Judge Chen overruled him each time. The evidence was properly authenticated, the chain of custody intact. Elena had done her homework. As the morning wore on, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. The smugness drained from the defense team's faces. Reporters scribbled furiously. The Blackstone brothers huddled in increasingly agitated whispers. "Your Honor," Elena said as the clock neared noon, "I'd like to submit Plaintiff's Exhibit 47. She handed a document to the clerk, who passed it to Judge Chen. As the judge read, her expression darkened. "This appears to be a record of payments from Titan Industries to various inspection agencies," Judge Chen observed. "Yes, Your Honor. As you can see, these payments coincide exactly with past safety inspections, despite multiple violations being reported by workers." Blackwell jumped up. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. The plaintiff is attempting to criminalize standard industry practices. Bribing safety inspectors is standard practice," Judge Chen asked coldly. The word bribe hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Blackwell opened his mouth, then closed it again. Elena wasn't finished. "If I may direct the court's attention to Exhibit 48. She produced a thick stack of papers that made the defense team visibly nervous. These were the crown jewels of her case, internal Titan documents that had never been meant to see daylight, bank records, offshore accounts, a paper trail of corruption that went far beyond safety violations. "These documents show a systematic pattern of fraud," Elena explained. "Titan Industries hasn't just been cutting corners on safety. They've been skimming from government contracts, falsifying environmental reports, and maintaining a slush fund specifically for paying off regulators and politicians." The Blackstone brothers were no longer whispering. Richard had turned pale. Thomas was sweating profusely. Gregory looked like he might be sick. Judge Chen studied the documents with growing alarm. "Ms. Martinez, how did you obtain these records?" Elena hesitated for the first time. I'd rather not say, Your Honor, but I can assure you they're authentic." In truth, the documents had arrived in her mailbox 6 months ago, unmarked and untraceable. She suspected they came from someone inside Titan, someone with a conscience who'd finally had enough, but she couldn't prove it, and she wouldn't risk exposing her source. "Your Honor," Blackwell said, his voice strained, "we request a recess to review these alleged documents." Judge Chen glanced at the clock. "We'll break for lunch. Court will reconvene at 2 p.m. As people filed out of the courtroom, Elena noticed something she hadn't expected. Fear in the Blackstone brothers' eyes. For the first time in her life, she'd made billionaires afraid. During the lunch break, Elena sat alone in the courthouse cafeteria, picking at a salad she couldn't afford but had bought to keep up appearances. Her phone buzzed with texts from Sofia. "Mom, you're trending on Twitter. Titan takedown. People are calling you a hero." Hero. The word felt strange. She was just a woman who'd lost her husband, who'd refused to let his death be swept under the rug like dust on these marble floors. She noticed people staring, whispering. A young paralegal from another case approached tentatively. "Excuse me, Ms. Martinez. I just wanted to say, what you're doing in there is incredible. We're all rooting for you." Before Elena could respond, commotion erupted near the cafeteria entrance. Harrison Blackwell was striding toward her, flanked by two junior associates. His face was a mask of professional courtesy, but his eyes were cold. "Ms. Martinez," he said, sitting across from her without invitation. "Impressive performance this morning. You've clearly done your homework." Elena said nothing, waiting. "My clients have authorized me to make you an offer," Blackwell continued. "A substantial offer. 8 figures. You could live comfortably for the rest of your life. Send your daughter to any college she wants. In exchange for dropping the case, naturally, and signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement." Elena set down her fork. 8 figures. That's what, 10 million? 20? 50, Blackwell said. $50 million, Ms. Martinez. More money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes. The number was staggering. Life-changing. With 50 million, she could buy Sofia everything she'd ever wanted, could quit the diner, could maybe even start a foundation in Carlos's name. "No," she heard herself say. Blackwell blinked. "I'm sorry. I said no. This isn't about money, Mr. Blackwell. It never was." His mask slipped for a moment, revealing genuine confusion. In his world, everything was about money. "Then what is it about?" "Justice," Elena said simply. "Accountability, making sure this never happens to another family." Blackwell leaned back, reassessing her. "You realize what you're up against. Even with your evidence, we have resources you can't imagine. We can tie this up in court for years, decades even. We can make your life very difficult." "My life is already difficult," Elena replied. "Has been since the night your clients killed my husband." The words hung between them like a challenge. Blackwell stood abruptly. "The offer stands until 2 p.m., he said. "Think carefully, Ms. Martinez. David doesn't always beat Goliath." As he walked away, Elena noticed her hands were shaking. $50 million. She'd just turned down $50 million. Sofia would think she was crazy. Maybe she was. But then she thought of Carlos, of his calloused hands and warm smile, of the way he'd believed in the American dream right up until it killed him. She thought of the other families who'd lost loved ones, who'd been paid off with pittances and silenced with legal threats. No, some things were worth more than money. At 2 p.m. sharp, court reconvened. The atmosphere had changed. Word of the morning session had spread, and the gallery was now packed to capacity. News vans lined the street outside. The Blackstone brothers looked haggard, as if they'd aged years during lunch. Judge Chen called the court to order. "Mr. Blackwell, have you had sufficient time to review the plaintiff's exhibits?" Blackwell rose slowly. "Your Honor, we have concerns about the authenticity of these documents. We request time to conduct forensic analysis." "Your Honor," Elena interrupted, "if the defense needs more proof, I have it." She reached into her folder one more time, pulling out a small flash drive. This contains video testimony from 14 former Titan employees, including 3 plant managers and 2 safety inspectors. They describe in detail the culture of corruption and cover-ups at Titan Industries. The Blackstone brothers exchanged panicked looks. Blackwell's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. Additionally, Elena continued, I have here signed affidavits from current employees who are willing to testify about ongoing safety violations at Titan facilities across the country. Judge Chen looked at the flash drive, then at the defendant's table. Mr. Blackwell, would your clients like to respond? For a long moment there was silence. Then Richard Blackstone stood up, ignoring his lawyer's frantic whispers. Your Honor, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, we would like to discuss a settlement. The courtroom erupted. Judge Chen banged her gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Elena remained standing, her heart pounding but her expression calm. She'd done it. She'd brought them to their knees, not with money or power or connections, but with truth. But she wasn't finished yet. Your Honor, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos, any settlement must include full public disclosure of all safety violations, implementation of real safety protocols at all Titan facilities, and the establishment of an independent oversight committee. And, she added, looking directly at the Blackstone brothers, a public apology to all the families who lost someone because profit mattered more than lives. The Blackstone brothers looked at their lawyer helplessly. They'd never apologized for anything in their lives. But they also saw the walls closing in. The evidence Elena had presented didn't just threaten civil penalties. It pointed to criminal conduct, fraud, bribery, possibly manslaughter. Gregory Blackstone was the first to crack. We accept those terms, he stammered. We need to discuss the financial, Blackwell began. 200 million, Elena said firmly, to be divided among all the victims' families, and another 100 million to establish a worker safety foundation. The numbers were astronomical, but she'd done her research. Titan Industries could afford it. More importantly, it would hurt enough to make them think twice before cutting corners again. Richard Blackstone's face was ashen. That's acceptable. Judge Chen looked between the parties, barely concealing her amazement. It appears we have the framework for a settlement. However, given the serious nature of the allegations raised today, I'm referring this matter to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation. The Blackstone brothers seemed to shrink in their expensive suits. Their empire, built on corners cut and lives lost, was crumbling. As the session concluded and the courtroom began to empty, Thomas Blackstone approached Elena. Up close, she could see the fear in his eyes, the desperation of a man watching everything he'd built slip away. Ms. Martinez, he said quietly, we never meant for anyone to die. Things got out of control. Elena studied him for a moment. My husband is still dead, Mr. Blackstone. Your apology doesn't change that. I know, he said, and for perhaps the first time in his life he sounded genuinely remorseful. But maybe we can make sure it doesn't happen again. As Elena gathered her documents, her weapons of truth, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find herself facing a crowd of people, some crying, others smiling through tears. They were families of other victims, workers from various Titan plants, ordinary people who'd been stepped on by corporate giants. Thank you, an elderly woman said, gripping Elena's hand. My son worked at the Detroit plant. They said his death was his fault, that he wasn't following procedures. Now I know the truth. One by one, they shared their stories, their gratitude, their renewed faith that sometimes, just sometimes, justice could prevail. Outside the courthouse, the scene was chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and protesters waved signs reading "People over Profits" and "Justice for the Riverside 12." Elena pushed through the crowd, looking for one face. She found Sofia at the bottom of the courthouse steps, tears streaming down her face. "Mom," she said, throwing her arms around Elena, "you did it. You actually did it." "We did it, mija," Elena corrected, holding her daughter tight. "Your papa did it. All those families did it. I just refused to give up." That night, as mother and daughter sat in their small apartment watching news coverage of the day's events, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Peace, not happiness. That would take time. But the quiet satisfaction of knowing she'd kept her promise to Carlos. The weeks that followed brought seismic changes. The criminal investigation led to federal charges against all 3 Blackstone brothers. Titan Industries' stock plummeted, and the company was eventually broken up and sold. New safety regulations were implemented industry-wide, dubbed Carlos's Law by the media. Elena used her portion of the settlement to establish the Martinez Foundation for Worker Safety, which provided free legal assistance to families facing similar battles. She completed her paralegal certification and began working with a law firm specializing in workers' rights. But perhaps the most profound change was personal. The woman who'd walked into that courtroom, tired, overlooked, underestimated, had transformed. Not into someone different, but into who she'd always been underneath, a fighter, a truth-teller, a force of nature that even billionaires had learned to fear. 6 months after the trial, Elena received a letter with no return address. Inside was a simple note: "Thank you for having the courage I didn't. A friend." She suspected it was from her anonymous source, the insider who'd provided the crucial documents. She'd never know for sure, but it didn't matter. They'd played their part, just as she'd played hers. Standing at Carlos's grave on the anniversary of his death, Elena placed fresh flowers against the headstone. "We did it, mi amor," she whispered. "They'll never forget you now. None of them will ever be forgotten again." A warm breeze stirred the cemetery grass, and for just a moment, Elena could almost feel Carlos's presence, his pride, his love. She smiled, tears in her eyes, knowing that sometimes the simplest people, the ones society overlooks and underestimates, can change the world. They just need to believe in the power of truth, the strength of perseverance, and the unstoppable force of a woman who refuses to back down. Elena Martinez had walked into that courtroom as nobody special, just a grieving widow with a folder full of papers. She'd walked out as something else entirely, a symbol of hope for everyone who'd ever been told they were too small to fight back. And in corporate boardrooms across the country, executives looked at their safety budgets with new eyes, knowing that somewhere out there might be another Elena Martinez, watching, waiting, gathering evidence. The meek hadn't inherited the earth, but they definitely sent a message. 6 months had passed since the trial that shook the corporate world, and Elena Martinez found herself in a different kind of battle. This time in the gleaming offices of Morrison and Associates, where she now worked as a senior paralegal. The firm had hired her specifically for her expertise in corporate malfeasance cases, but not everyone welcomed her presence. The conference room buzzed with tension as Elena spread her files across the mahogany table. James Morrison, the firm's founding partner, had called an emergency meeting about their newest case, a class action against Meridian Pharmaceuticals. The company had allegedly concealed data about fatal side effects in their flagship heart medication. "With all due respect," Dennis Crawford, a junior partner, interjected before Elena could begin her presentation, "shouldn't someone with actual legal credentials handle this analysis?" His voice dripped with the kind of condescension she'd grown accustomed to. Elena met his gaze steadily. "Mr. Crawford, I've reviewed over 10,000 pages of documents in this case. I found the smoking gun that your team missed." She clicked to the next slide, revealing an internal memo marked "Confidential." This email chain shows Meridian executives discussing how to bury adverse trial results. They knew their drug caused Liver failure in 12% of patients over 60. The room fell silent. Dennis shifted uncomfortably in his leather chair. That's privileged information, he stammered. How did you... It was filed incorrectly in the public docket, Elena explained. Page 7,132 of their motion to dismiss. Your team's software search missed it because they misspelled hepatic failure as hepatoc. I read every page manually. James Morrison leaned forward, interest sparking in his eyes. Go on, Elena. The presentation continued for another hour, with Elena methodically laying out a pattern of deception that rivaled the Titan Industries case. She'd found falsified test results, doctored statistics, and a trail of settlements with grieving families who'd been sworn to secrecy. Based on these findings, she concluded, Meridian's liability could exceed $2 billion. Dennis scoffed. You're overreaching. Meridian has the best defense team in the country. They'll tear this apart. Actually, James interrupted. Studying the documents Elena had compiled, I think Ms. Martinez has built something extraordinary here. Dennis, I want you to work with her on developing our trial strategy. Dennis's face flushed red. You want me to work under a paralegal? I want you to work with the person who understands this case better than anyone in this room, James replied firmly. After the meeting, Elena was gathering her materials when Margaret Chen, yes, the same Judge Chen from the Titan trial, who had since left the bench for private practice, approached her. Impressive work, Margaret said. You have a gift for seeing what others miss. Thank you, Elena replied, though sometimes I wonder if it's a gift or a curse. These documents, they represent real people who suffered. Margaret nodded thoughtfully. Have you considered law school? With your talents? I start at Northwestern next fall, Elena revealed. Evening program. Mr. Morrison is covering my tuition. Smart man. He knows talent when he sees it. The Meridian case consumed Elena's life for the next several months. She worked 16-hour days, poring over medical records, financial statements, and corporate communications. Sofia, now in her first year at University of Chicago on a full scholarship, would sometimes study alongside her mother in their new modest home in Oak Park. Mom, Sofia said one evening, looking up from her organic chemistry textbook, do you ever regret it, taking on these massive corporations? It's dangerous. Elena set down the deposition transcript she was annotating. Your father used to say that the most dangerous thing in the world is a good person who does nothing. Sofia smiled sadly. I miss him. Every day, mija. But this work, it's how I honor him. Their conversation was interrupted by Elena's phone buzzing. Unknown number. Elena Martinez. The voice was female, young, frightened. Yes? My name is Dr. Sarah Lindstrom. I work for Meridian Pharmaceuticals. I need to talk to you about Project Cassandra. Elena's pulse quickened. Project Cassandra had appeared in several documents, always redacted, always mysterious. I can meet you tomorrow. No, tonight, Millennium Park, by the Cloud Gate, midnight. Come alone. The line went dead. Elena stared at her phone, weighing the risks. She thought of Carlos, of the anonymous source who'd helped bring down Titan Industries. Sometimes justice required courage. I have to go out, she told Sofia. Now, it's almost 11. Work emergency. Lock the door behind me. Millennium Park was eerily quiet at midnight, the city lights reflecting off the massive steel sculpture. Elena waited, her breath visible in the cold October air. She texted James Morrison her location, just in case. A figure emerged from the shadows. Dr. Sarah Lindstrom was younger than Elena expected, maybe 30, with anxious eyes and trembling hands. Thank you for coming, Sarah whispered, glancing around nervously. I don't have much time. They monitor everything. What's Project Cassandra? Sarah pulled a flash drive from her pocket. The real trials, the ones they never submitted to the FDA. Her voice cracked. Ms. Martinez, the drug doesn't just cause liver failure. In certain genetic profiles, it triggers aggressive pancreatic cancer. They've known for 3 years. Elena felt her stomach drop. How many people? We estimate 4,000 deaths, maybe more. They've been paying off coroners, classifying deaths as natural causes. Sarah pressed the flash drive into Elena's hand. Everything's here. Trial data, cover-up communications. The algorithm they use to identify high-risk patients they reject for the medication. Why come forward now? Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. My father died last month. He was taking the medication. I helped develop it. I killed my own father. No, Elena said firmly, gripping the young woman's shoulders. They killed your father, the executives who buried this data. You're trying to save others. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. There's more. Senator Patricia Williams. She's been taking payments from Meridian to block safety legislation. The proof is in there too. A car engine roared to life nearby. Sarah jumped. I have to go. They'll know I copied the files soon. Be careful, Ms. Martinez. These people, they're more dangerous than the Blackstones ever were. Before Elena could respond, Sarah vanished into the night. The next morning, Elena sat in James Morrison's office, the flash drive's contents displayed on his computer screen. His face had gone progressively paler as they reviewed the files. Jesus Christ, he muttered. This is systematic murder. We need to file an amended complaint immediately, Elena said, and contact the FBI, the FDA, Her words were cut short by James's secretary bursting in. Mr. Morrison, you need to see this. She turned on the office television. The breaking news banner read, Meridian Pharmaceuticals whistleblower found dead. Elena's blood ran cold as Sarah Lindstrom's photo appeared on screen. Dr. Sarah Lindstrom, a researcher at Meridian Pharmaceuticals, died early this morning in what police are calling an apparent suicide. Sources say she had been struggling with depression following her father's recent death. No, Elena whispered. No, no, no. James muted the television. Elena, we need to... They killed her, Elena said, her voice shaking with rage. Just like they killed all those patients. Just like they would have kept killing. We don't know that. I do. Elena stood, her fear transforming into determination. And now we have to finish what she started. The amended complaint landed like a bomb. Within hours, Meridian's stock plummeted 30%. Senator Williams called a press conference denying any wrongdoing. The FDA announced an emergency review of the drug, but Meridian fought back hard. Elena began receiving anonymous threats. Her car was vandalized. Someone broke into the Oak Park house while she and Sofia were at work and school, though nothing was taken. A clear message. Maybe we should back off, Dennis suggested during a strategy meeting. He'd grudgingly come to respect Elena, but remained cautious. Let the federal authorities handle it. And let them bury it like they buried Dr. Lindstrom, Elena shot back. No, we push harder. That evening, as Elena worked late at the office, she heard footsteps in the empty hallway. She tensed, reaching for her phone. Ms. Martinez? She turned to find a security guard she didn't recognize. Something in his eyes set off alarm bells. Yes? Package for you at the front desk. At this hour? The guard stepped closer. Too close. Elena saw the gun in his waistband. You should have taken their offer, he said quietly. Elena's mind raced. The nearest exit was 30 feet away. Her phone was on the desk. The guard stood between her and both. What offer? She asked, stalling. Meridian wants this to go away. They'll pay. More than you got from Titan. Enough to disappear, start fresh somewhere. And if I refuse... His hand moved toward the gun. People disappear anyway. Elena thought of Carlos, of Sarah Lindstrom, of the thousands of victims. She thought of Sofia, waiting at home. In one fluid motion, she grabbed her laptop and hurled it at the guard's face. He stumbled backward, cursing. Elena sprinted for the stairwell, her heels clattering on the marble floor. "Stop!" She heard the gun clear its holster, but didn't look back. She burst through the stairwell door as a bullet sparked off the metal frame. Elena ran down 15 flights, her lungs burning, expecting to hear footsteps behind her. But silence followed. He must have taken the elevator to cut her off. She exited on the 10th floor, ducking into an empty conference room. With shaking hands, she called 911, then James Morrison. Within minutes, real police flooded the building. They found the fake security guard's abandoned uniform, but no trace of the man himself. The security cameras mysteriously had malfunctioned during the incident. "We're putting you in protective custody," Detective Riley insisted as they stood in the lobby. "No," Elena said firmly. "They want me scared. They want me hiding. I have a deposition tomorrow with Meridian's CEO. I'll be there." James Morrison arrived, disheveled and worried. "Elena, this is insane. We can postpone. Sarah Lindstrom died to get us this information. I won't let her death be meaningless." The next morning, Elena walked into the deposition room flanked by security. Across the table sat Kenneth Blackwood, Meridian's CEO, and a phalanx of lawyers. Blackwood was 65, with silver hair and cold blue eyes that had stared down congressional committees without blinking. "State your name for the record," Elena began, her voice steady despite everything. "Kenneth Marcus Blackwood." "Mr. Blackwood, are you familiar with Project Cassandra?" His lawyer immediately objected. "That's privileged information." "Not anymore," Elena cut in, sliding a document across the table. "This memo, written by Dr. Lindstrom, details the project's findings. Did you authorize the suppression of data showing your drug causes pancreatic cancer?" Blackwood's face remained impassive. "I don't recall any such data." For 6 grueling hours, Elena methodically dismantled Blackwood's denials. She presented email after email, memo after memo, each one tightening the noose. Sweat beaded on his forehead as she produced documents he thought had been destroyed. "This email, dated March 15th, shows you instructing the research team to, quote, bury the cancer data so deep God himself couldn't find it. Do you deny writing this?" Blackwood's lawyer whispered frantically in his ear. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination." "For the record, you're refusing to answer whether you conspired to hide data about a drug that killed thousands of people." "Asked and answered," the lawyer snapped. "This deposition is over." As they stormed out, Elena allowed herself a small smile. Invoking the fifth in a civil deposition could be used against Blackwood in court. He'd just handed them a powerful weapon. That night, Elena's phone rang. James Morrison. "Elena, turn on CNN." She did. Her jaw dropped. Breaking news. Senator Patricia Williams announces resignation amid pharmaceutical bribery scandal. FBI raids Meridian Pharmaceuticals headquarters. The dominoes were falling. Over the following weeks, the case exploded into a national scandal. More whistleblowers emerged. Emboldened by Sarah's sacrifice and Elena's persistence, the death toll revised upward to over 6,000. Meridian's board fired Blackwood, who was arrested on federal charges ranging from fraud to conspiracy to commit murder. The trial began in spring. Elena, now a second-year law student, sat at the counsel table as Morrison and Associates' lead investigator. The courtroom was packed with victims' families, reporters, and industry watchdogs. Meridian's defense team tried every trick, attacking Elena's credentials, questioning the authenticity of documents, claiming the cancer link was coincidental. But the evidence was overwhelming. Elena's testimony lasted 3 days. She walked. The jury threw each piece of the puzzle, explaining complex medical data in terms anyone could understand. She spoke of Sarah Lindstrom's courage, of the thousands of victims, of a system that valued profit over human life. Ms. Martinez, Meridian's lead counsel, challenged during cross-examination, "Isn't it true you have a personal vendetta against large corporations since your husband's death?" Elena met his gaze steadily. "I have a personal commitment to truth. If that threatens corporations that lie and kill, then yes, I suppose you could call it a vendetta." The jury deliberated for only 6 hours. "We find for the plaintiffs on all counts. We award compensatory damages of $2 billion and punitive damages of $8 billion. $10 billion. The largest pharmaceutical verdict in U.S. history. As the verdict was read, Elena noticed Kenneth Blackwood in the gallery. He'd been out on bail, awaiting his criminal trial. Their eyes met across the courtroom. She saw no remorse, only cold fury. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. Elena stood with the victims' families, many crying with relief. "Ms. Martinez, how does it feel to have taken down another corporate giant?" "This isn't about me," Elena replied. "It's about them." She gestured to the families, and about Dr. Sarah Lindstrom, who gave her life to expose the truth. "It's about a system that needs to change. What's next for you? Law school, more cases, there's still work to do." As the crowd dispersed, Elena noticed a familiar face. Thomas Blackstone, the former Titan Industries executive. He approached, hesitantly. "Ms. Martinez, I wanted to thank you." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Thank me? Prison gave me time to think about what we did, what you did. I'm testifying for the prosecution in the Meridian criminal trial. Maybe it's a start at making amends." Elena studied him. He looked different, humbler somehow. "It's a start," she agreed. That evening, Elena and Sofia celebrated at their favorite restaurant. The settlement money had made them comfortable, but Elena still lived modestly, pouring most of her resources into the Martinez Foundation. "To Dad?" Sofia raised her glass. "To Carlos," Elena agreed, "and to Sarah Lindstrom, and to everyone who stands up when it would be easier to stay silent." As they clinked glasses, Elena's phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Ms. Martinez, this is Dr. Patricia Wong. I work for Global Dynamics. We make agricultural chemicals. I have information about groundwater contamination that the company has been hiding for decades. Can we meet?" Elena looked at Sofia, who smiled knowingly. "Yes," Elena said into the phone. "Tell me where and when." The work continued. It always would. Because somewhere, in some boardroom, someone was deciding that profits mattered more than lives. And Elena Martinez would be waiting, armed with truth and an unshakable belief that one person, even a simple woman everyone underestimated, could change the world. The victories kept coming. The Meridian executives received lengthy prison sentences. Senator Williams pleaded guilty to corruption charges. New legislation passed requiring stricter oversight of pharmaceutical trials, dubbed the Lindstrom Act. Elena graduated from law school at the top of her class. Job offers poured in from prestigious firms across the country, but she had different plans. "Martinez and Associates," she told Sofia over dinner. "Small firm, will take cases others won't touch." "We?" Sofia asked, grinning. "You graduate from med school in 2 years. Think about it. A lawyer and a doctor taking on healthcare fraud. We'd be unstoppable." "Mum, that's brilliant. Dad would be so proud." They were interrupted by a knock at the door. Elena opened it to find a young woman, perhaps 25, clutching a manila folder. "Ms. Martinez, I'm Rachel Kim. My mother worked at a chemical plant in Louisiana. She died of a rare cancer last year. Dozens of workers have the same cancer. The company says it's coincidence, but..." She held out the folder with trembling hands. Elena took it, feeling the familiar weight of documents that could change lives. "Come in, Rachel. Tell me everything." As she led the young woman inside, Elena thought of her journey, from grieving widow to corporate nightmare. She thought of the powerful men who'd laughed at her, dismissed her, threatened her. She thought of the allies she'd found, the lives she'd saved, the systems she'd changed. But mostly, she thought of Carlos and how he'd always believed in the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things. The manila folder felt warm in her hands, full of possibility and purpose. Another fight, another chance to prove that truth, wielded by someone who refused to back down, remained the most powerful force in the world. Elena Martinez had started as nobody special, just a woman with a folder and a cause. Now she was something else entirely. A beacon for anyone who'd ever been told they were too small, too powerless, too insignificant to make a difference. The phone rang again, then again. More voices seeking justice. More stories of corporate greed and human suffering. More chances to tip the scales toward justice. Elena smiled, opening the folder Rachel had brought. The work was never ending, but that was okay. Someone had to do it. And Elena Martinez was just getting started. The Louisiana case would prove to be Elena's most dangerous yet. Rachel Kim's mother had worked at Petrochem United's Baton Rouge facility for 22 years before dying of angiosarcoma, a rare liver cancer. Within months of Elena taking the case, 17 more workers came forward with the same diagnosis. Elena's new office on West Madison Street was modest, just 3 rooms and a conference area, but the walls were lined with case files that told stories of corporate negligence across America. Sofia, now in her medical residency at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, often stopped by between shifts to help review medical records. "Mom, look at this," Sofia said one evening, spreading toxicology reports across the conference table. "The vinyl chloride levels in these workers' blood samples are off the charts. Petrochem's own safety data shows they knew the exposure limits were being exceeded since 1998. Elena studied the documents, her trained eye catching patterns. And they never reported it to OSHA, never warned the workers. Classic corporate playbook. Her phone buzzed. Detective Riley, who'd become an unofficial advisor since the Meridian case. "Elena, heads up. Petrochem just hired the Warwick Group." Elena's blood chilled. The Warwick Group wasn't a law firm. They were corporate fixers, known for making problems disappear through methods that skirted the edge of legality. "Thanks for the warning. Watch your back. These guys play dirty." The first sign of trouble came a week later. Elena arrived at her office to find the door ajar, papers scattered everywhere, nothing stolen, but every file had been photographed. She could tell by the slight disarrangement. "They're mapping our case," she told James. Morrison over coffee. Though she'd left his firm to start her own practice, he remained a mentor and friend. "Maybe it's time to bring in additional security," James suggested. "Can't afford it. Every dollar goes to the case." "Elena, you can't help anyone if you're dead." She thought of Sarah Lindstrom. Sometimes the risk is part of the job. The Petrochem case gained momentum as more evidence surfaced. Elena discovered internal memos discussing something called Project Greenlight, a systematic effort to doctor safety records and air quality measurements. The cancer cluster wasn't limited to Baton Rouge. Similar patterns emerged at Petrochem, facilities in Texas, Alabama, and Ohio. During a deposition in Houston, Elena faced Petrochem's CEO, Richard Dalton. Unlike previous corporate executives she'd confronted, Dalton radiated menace rather than arrogance. "Mr. Dalton, this memo from 2003 shows you personally approved the falsification of EPA reports. How do you explain that?" Dalton leaned forward, his voice low. "Careful, Ms. Martinez. You're swimming in deep waters now." "Is that a threat? An observation? People who dig too deep sometimes find themselves buried." That night, Elena's car wouldn't start. The mechanic found cut brake lines. "Mom, please," Sofia begged when Elena called her. "Let someone else handle this case. And would you abandon a patient because treating them was dangerous?" Sofia sighed. "That's different." "No, mija, it's exactly the same." Elena moved forward with characteristic determination, but now she varied her routines, checked her mirrors constantly, and carried pepper spray. She hired a private investigator to watch her apartment building at night. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Martin Ashford, Petrochem's former chief safety officer, reached out through intermediaries. He was dying of pancreatic cancer, ironically from exposure to the same chemicals he'd helped conceal, and wanted to clear his conscience. They met in a hospital room in Minneapolis, where Ashford lay connected to monitors and IV drips. His skin was jaundiced, his voice weak, but his memory was sharp. "Project Greenlight was Dalton's baby," Ashford wheezed. "We knew by 1995 that our vinyl chloride monomers were causing DNA mutations. The cancer rates were undeniable, but retrofitting the plants would have cost billions." Elena recorded everything, with Ashford's permission. How many people knew? The whole executive team, the board, even some senators who got campaign contributions to look the other way. "Do you have proof?" Ashford pointed to a briefcase in the corner. 20 years of documents. "I knew this day would come." Elena spent 3 days in Minneapolis, methodically reviewing Ashford's files with Sofia, who'd taken leave to help. The evidence was staggering. Falsified medical records, bribed physicians, even a company-funded study that proved the cancer link, but was never published. Zardu. "This is bigger than Meridian," Sofia whispered, reading about workers who died in their 40s and 50s, leaving behind confused families who never knew what killed them. Elena's phone rang. Her investigator. "2 men have been watching your apartment, professional surveillance team." "Warwick Group?" "Most likely. There's something else. Your office was broken into again. This time, they planted something." Elena felt her stomach drop. "Planted what?" "Drugs. Enough to put you away for trafficking. I've already called my contact at Chicago PD. They're sending someone we trust." The next morning, Elena held a press conference. If Petrochem wanted to play dirty, she'd fight in the light. Petrochem United has systematically poisoned thousands of workers across multiple states, she announced to a packed room of reporters. They've covered up cancer clusters, bribed officials, and now they're attempting to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. But we have the evidence, including testimony from their former chief safety officer. The story exploded across national media. Petrochem poison trended on social media. The EPA announced an investigation. OSHA launched surprise inspections at all Petrochem facilities, but Dalton wasn't finished. 3 nights later, Elena was working late when her office window shattered. A Molotov cocktail arced through the opening, spreading flames across the carpet. Elena grabbed her laptop and the most critical files, racing for the exit as smoke filled the room. Fire trucks arrived within minutes, but half the office was destroyed. Elena stood on the sidewalk, watching firefighters battle the blaze, when her phone rang. "Next time you won't be so lucky," said a mechanically distorted voice. "You won't stop me," Elena replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We'll see." The fire made national news. Public outrage intensified. Workers at petrochem plants across the country staged walkouts. Institutional investors began dumping petrochem stock. James Morrison offered Elena space in his firm's offices. Major law firms volunteered pro bono support. The Martinez Foundation received donations from across the country. Even former Meridian executives seeking redemption offered to testify about industry practices. The trial began 6 months later in federal court. Elena had assembled a team of brilliant young lawyers, all inspired by her story. The evidence was overwhelming: Ashford's documents, worker testimonies, expert analyses showing vinyl chloride levels thousands of times above safe limits. Dalton took the stand, his composure cracking under Elena's relentless questioning. You knew these chemicals caused cancer, yet you exposed workers daily. How do you justify that? Business requires tough decisions, Dalton snapped. Deciding to let people die for profit isn't tough, it's criminal. Objection, Petrochem's lawyer shouted. Sustained, the judge ruled, but the jury had heard enough. The verdict came after 2 weeks of deliberation, guilty on all counts. The jury awarded $15 billion in damages, a new record. Criminal charges followed. Dalton and 6 other executives were arrested on charges ranging from manslaughter to racketeering. At the sentencing hearing, victim impact statements lasted 2 days. Workers' widows, orphaned children, and dying employees told their stories. Elena sat with them, holding hands, offering tissues, being the rock they needed. Dalton received 40 years. He'd die in prison. Outside the courthouse, Elena faced a sea of cameras. Rachel Kim stood beside her, clutching a photo of her mother. This victory belongs to the workers who trusted corporate promises and paid with their lives, Elena said. To the families who fought for truth when everyone told them to accept the lies. And to the brave souls who risked everything to expose these crimes. A reporter called out, Ms. Martinez, Forbes is calling you the corporate killer. How do you feel about that nickname? Elena smiled slightly. I prefer truth teller. That's all I've ever been. That evening, Elena and Sofia visited Carlos's grave. They'd made it a tradition after each major case, bringing fresh flowers and updates. Petrochem is restructuring, Elena told the headstone. New safety protocols, victim compensation fund, independent monitoring. It won't bring anyone back, but maybe it'll save others. Sofia squeezed her mother's hand. He'd be so proud, Mom. You've changed the world. We all did it together. As they turned to leave, Elena's phone buzzed. She almost ignored it. She was tired, emotionally drained, but something made her look. Ms. Martinez, this is Dr. Elizabeth Warner. I'm a neurologist at Seattle General. For the past 5 years, we've seen an unusual spike in early-onset Alzheimer's among tech workers. All of them worked at Nexus Systems. All were exposed to experimental nanomaterials. The company is covering it up. Can you help? Elena looked at Sofia, who nodded without hesitation. Yes, Elena said. Send me everything you have. Walking through the cemetery gates, Elena reflected on her journey. From a grieving widow with a manila folder to one of the most feared litigators in America. She'd brought down 3 corporate giants, changed federal laws, and saved countless lives. But the work continued. In boardrooms across America, executives still weighed lives against profits. Workers still trusted corporate promises. Families still grieved preventable losses. Elena Martinez would be there, armed with truth, courage, and an unshakable belief that justice could prevail. She was no longer the simple woman who'd been humiliated at her husband's memorial. She was something more, a force of nature that made billionaires tremble and gave voice to the voiceless. The Nexus Systems case would be another battle, but Elena was ready. She had her team, her experience, and most importantly, her purpose. Somewhere, Carlos was watching, proud of the woman who'd turned grief into justice, loss into change. As She drove home through Chicago's glittering skyline. Elena's phone buzzed with messages from workers, whistleblowers, and families seeking help. Each one a story, a chance to make things right. She smiled, thinking of something Carlos used to say: "One person can't change the world, mi amor, but one person can start the change." Elena Martinez had started something that couldn't be stopped, and tomorrow she'd begin again. The corporate world had learned to fear the woman with the manila folder. But more importantly, the powerless had learned to hope. Sometimes, justice came in expensive suits and prestigious degrees, but sometimes, just sometimes, it came in the form of a simple woman who refused to back down, who saw truth where others saw profit, who fought when others fled. Elena Martinez was that woman, and her story was far from over. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.